I never thought my life would change because of a single email. It was an unassuming Monday morning when it arrived, nestled between a coupon for 20% off car washes and a work memo about office recycling policies. The subject line read, "Thought you should know." I almost deleted it, but something about the sender's name, Anonymous Alert, piqued my curiosity. Against my better judgment, I clicked. The email contained one photo. Grainy, slightly blurred, but unmistakably damning. My wife, Claire, sitting too close to a man I didn't recognize in what looked like a cozy corner of a dimly lit restaurant. Her laugh was frozen in time, her hand resting on the man's arm as if it belonged there. My world tilted. The caption below the image read, "This is Dave. They've been meeting up every Friday after work. Do what you want with this info." I stared at the screen, my coffee untouched, the steam curling upward like the remnants of the life I thought I knew. This couldn't be real. It had to be a mistake. Claire was my anchor, the dependable, late-night chocolate-sharing, inside joke-loving Claire. We had just celebrated our 10th anniversary last month. We had plans for the future, plans for kids, plans for everything, apparently, but honesty. My first instinct was to call her, demand an explanation. But as my finger hovered over her name in my phone, another thought crept in. What if it's true? What if she lies? Instead, I saved the photo to my computer, closed the laptop, and headed to work, where I spent the day pretending everything was fine. But everything was not fine. That night, I waited until Claire fell asleep and scoured her phone, my hands trembling. It was locked, of course. She'd recently added a passcode, a change she'd brushed off with a vague, "Work requires it now." But I wasn't giving up. And when I found what I was looking for, it was far worse than I could have imagined. The next morning, I sat in my car, the engine idling as I stared at the dashboard. I hadn't slept. The contents of Claire's phone haunted me, replaying in my mind like a broken record. I had spent hours trying to crack the passcode. When I finally guessed correctly, her birth year of all things, it felt like a hollow victory. I wasn't proud of what I was doing, but the unknown was eating me alive. What I found was a Pandora's box I couldn't shut. The first clue had been her calendar. A recurring Friday evening appointment titled Meeting Work popped up like a beacon. It didn't take long to cross-reference those dates with the timestamps on the photos in her phone. Most were harmless. Pictures of our cat, sunsets, selfies she'd taken while pretending not to. But there were others. Pictures of wine glasses, half empty. A hand resting on a table, too large to be hers. Shadows of someone leaning in for what seemed like a laugh. No faces. Nothing definitive. But enough. It was the messages that sealed it. Buried in an innocuous group chat with her coworkers were private texts with someone saved as D. D. Counting down the hours. Friday can't come soon enough. Claire, same. I've been thinking about last time all week. I clenched the steering wheel. My stomach churned at the memory of reading those words, my mind crafting images I didn't want but couldn't suppress. I couldn't even be sure what last time meant, and that uncertainty felt like a blade twisting deeper. I turned the engine off and closed my eyes. I needed a plan. Confronting Claire without more proof felt like walking into battle unarmed. But I couldn't sit in limbo forever. My thoughts were interrupted by the buzz of my phone. A notification from a private investigator I'd contacted in a haze of desperation late last night. "P.I. I got your email. I can start surveillance this Friday. If you want out at any time, just say the word." I stared at the message. The idea of spying on Claire felt disgusting, like sinking to a level I never thought I'd reach. But I needed answers. The kind that couldn't be brushed off with half-truths or manipulation. I typed back, "Do it." As the week dragged on, I found myself existing in a strange limbo. I still kissed Claire goodbye in the mornings. We still shared dinner, our conversation orbiting safe, mundane topics. She laughed at my jokes. I smiled at hers. But beneath it all, there was a quiet war raging inside me. A push and pull between wanting to believe her and fearing the worst. Friday came faster than I expected. That evening, as Claire prepared to leave for her work meeting, I played my part. I stood by the door, leaning against the frame as she slipped on her coat. She looked radiant, her auburn hair catching the light as she tied her scarf. "Don't wait up," she said, pecking my cheek. I nodded, my face a mask. "Have fun." When the door clicked shut, I exhaled shakily and reached for my phone. The private investigator's message was already waiting for me. "She's on the move. I'll keep you updated." I sank into the couch, my heart pounding as I stared at the screen, waiting for the truth to find me. I sat in the darkened living room, my only companion the glow of my phone. Every buzz, every vibration sent a jolt through my chest. The investigator's updates trickled in sporadically. "P.I. She's heading downtown. Black sedan, likely a rideshare. P.I. Arrived at Watermark Bistro, corner booth. Not alone." My grip on the phone tightened, my knuckles turning white. My mind painted vivid pictures of what the investigator saw, but didn't say. Not alone. The two words felt like a hammer blow. I stared at the investigator's attached photo, a blurry image of Claire's unmistakable profile and a man sitting across from her. Dave, presumably. His hand was outstretched on the table, close to hers, but not quite touching. Yet, my jaw tightened. I wanted to drive to the restaurant, march in, and lay everything bare. But then what? Cause a scene? Lose control? Instead, I stayed rooted in place, fighting the instinct to act. I couldn't confront her yet. Not until I knew how deep this went. The next text came 20 minutes later. "P.I. Still there. Lots of laughing. Took a few more pics. Sending now?" I opened the photos with shaking hands. They were seated close enough to look like an intimate couple. Claire leaned forward, her head tilted in that way she always did when she was genuinely enjoying herself. The man's face was partially visible now. Dark-haired, neatly trimmed beard, early 40s, wearing a navy blazer. He looked so ordinary. I scrolled to the last image, my breath hitching. Claire's hand now rested lightly on the man's wrist. She wasn't pulling away. The investigator's next message made my stomach drop. "P.I. Leaving restaurant. Walking together. Looks like they're headed toward the parking lot." Following discreetly. I paced the living room, my thoughts racing. What now? What happens next? I clung to the hope that it was just dinner, a lapse in judgment she'd regret, something we could fix. But when the next message came, it snuffed out that fragile hope. "P.I. Got in the same car. He's driving." Pulled into a private driveway about 10 minutes from the restaurant. I sank onto the couch, feeling like the air had been punched out of me. My phone buzzed again. "P.I. House is dark. No sign of them leaving yet. What do you want me to do?" I stared at the screen, unsure how to respond. The answer seemed obvious. I had to know everything. But the cost of knowing felt unbearable. I typed back, "Wait, let me know if anything changes." The minutes ticked by like hours. My mind churned through every possibility, every excuse, every desperate denial. But as the silence dragged on, the truth became harder to ignore. Finally, the investigator's update came, short and final. "P.I. No movement. Lights on in the upstairs window. I think that's it for tonight." I didn't reply. I sat motionless, staring at the screen, unable to reconcile the woman I thought I knew with the person who had just spent the night in another man's house. When Claire walked through the door the next morning, I was waiting for her. The front door creaked open at 7:14 a.m., and Claire stepped inside, her heels clicking softly on the hardwood. She froze when she saw me sitting at the kitchen table, a mug of coffee in my hands, my face shadowed by the morning light streaming through the window. "You're up early," she said, her voice carefully neutral. She slipped off her scarf, draping it over the back of a chair. I didn't reply immediately. My eyes locked onto her, scanning every detail. The faint smudge of mascara beneath her eyes, the wrinkle in her blouse, the slight messiness of her once perfect hair. I could almost smell the lies radiating off her. "Late night?" I finally asked, my tone flat. Claire hesitated. "Work ran long. I ended up grabbing a drink with some colleagues afterward." She moved toward the sink, busying herself by pouring a glass of water. "Didn't want to wake you coming in." Her casual tone might have fooled me before, but not now. I leaned back in my chair, tapping the side of my mug with my finger. "Colleagues, huh? I let the word hang in the air, daring her to explain further. Claire stilled, the glass poised halfway to her lips. She turned to face me, her smile thin and slightly strained. Yes, colleagues. What's with a third degree? Just curious, I said, my voice deceptively calm. You looked happy last night. Her brow furrowed. What's that supposed to mean? I stared at her, the weight of my silence pressing down on her like a storm cloud. It means, I said slowly, that I know you weren't with your colleagues, Claire. Her face fell, the color draining from her cheeks. For a fleeting moment, she looked like a cornered animal, but she quickly masked it with indignation. Excuse me, she snapped. What are you even talking about? I stood, my chair scraping loudly against the floor. I grabbed my phone from the table, swiping to the photo the investigator had sent and holding it out to her. This, I said coldly. This is what I'm talking about. Claire's eyes flicked to the screen, widening slightly before narrowing in anger. Are you spying on me now? Is that what this is? Don't turn this on me, I shot back, my voice rising. You're the one sneaking off with another man. I didn't want to believe it, Claire. But there it is, proof. So spare me the outrage. She set the glass down hard, water sloshing over the edge. You had someone follow me? Do you realize how insane that is? Don't, I said, my tone sharp and cutting. Don't make me the villain here. You lied to me. For weeks, months, maybe. Who is he? How long has this been going on? Claire's mouth opened, then closed, as if she was weighing her options. She finally crossed her arms, her chin lifting defiantly. His name is Dave. He's someone I work with. I barked out a bitter laugh. Well, that clears everything up. Thanks for being so forthcoming. Claire's eyes flashed with anger. It's not what you think, Matt. It's just dinner and conversation. Someone to talk to. That's all. Someone to talk to? I repeated, my voice dripping with disbelief. You spent the night at his house, Claire. Don't insult me by pretending this is innocent. I fell asleep on the couch, she shot back, her voice cracking. It wasn't like that. Do you honestly expect me to believe that? My voice was ice cold now, my patience fraying. I saw the photos. I read the texts. And don't bother denying it. I've seen enough to know exactly what's going on. Claire's defiance faltered, her eyes darting to the floor. I didn't mean for it to get this far, she whispered. My heart twisted, a mix of pain and fury clawing at my chest. But it did, I said, my voice breaking. You made a choice, Claire. Over and over again. The silence between us stretched, heavy and suffocating. Finally, I shook my head, my voice barely above a whisper. I don't even know who you are anymore. Claire's lip trembled. I'm still me, Matt. I still love you. But I wasn't sure I believed her. I didn't respond right away. The words, I still love you, hung in the air, mocking the shattered trust between us. I wanted to believe her, to cling to the life we'd built together, but every fiber of my being screamed that this wasn't love, not the kind it used to be. You love me, I said quietly, my voice hollow. But you love him too, don't you? Claire flinched as though I'd struck her. It's not the same, she said quickly, tears glistening in her eyes. It's different with Dave. It's just a distraction. You're my husband. You're the one I chose. I let out a bitter laugh, pacing the room as if moving might ease the boiling anger in my chest. The one you chose? That's rich, Claire. You chose to meet him. You chose to lie to me. And now you expect me to just what? Sit here and accept that I'm your main course, while he's your distraction? It's not like that. Claire cried, her voice breaking. You don't understand how lonely I've felt, Matt. You're always so distant, so consumed with work. I needed someone to notice me again. The words hit me like a slap, the weight of her accusation stinging more than I cared to admit. But instead of responding with empathy, my pride roared to life. So this is my fault, I said sharply. You couldn't just talk to me about how you felt? No, you had to find some other guy to fill the gaps while I'm working my ass off to give us a good life. It wasn't like I planned this, she yelled back, her voice cracking. I didn't wake up one day and decide to hurt you. It just happened. I shook my head, my laughter bitter and joyless. The classic excuse. It just happened. Let me guess. One thing led to another, and before you knew it, you were sneaking out to meetings every Friday. Is that about right? Claire wiped at her cheeks, but the tears kept coming. It didn't mean anything, Matt. I swear to you it didn't. I never wanted this to destroy us. But it did, I said, my voice soft but firm. Whether you wanted it or not, it's done. You made your choices, Claire. You put whatever you had with him above what we had here. And now, I don't know how to fix this, or if I even want to. The room fell into a suffocating silence, both of us standing still as the weight of my words settled between us. Finally, Claire spoke, her voice trembling. Are you saying you're done? Just like that? I closed my eyes, the gravity of the moment pressing down on me. Every memory we'd shared, every plan we'd made, seemed to flash before me in rapid succession. The life we'd built together was crumbling, and for the first time, I wasn't sure I had the strength or the will to hold it together. I'm saying I need time, I said finally, my voice raw. To think, to figure out if there's even anything left worth saving. Claire took a shaky breath, nodding. I'll do whatever it takes, Matt. I'll end it with him. I'll prove to you that I want us to work. I looked at her, my expression unreadable. Prove it to yourself first, I said. Then I grabbed my keys and walked out the door, leaving her standing alone in the kitchen. The cold morning air hit me like a slap as I stepped outside, my breath visible in the crisp December chill. I had no destination in mind, only a desperate need to escape the suffocating tension of the house. I drove aimlessly through town, the radio off, the silence in the car deafening. My thoughts churned like a storm, alternating between anger, hurt, and a quiet, nagging voice asking, do I still love her? After an hour, I found myself parked outside a coffee shop I used to frequent years ago, back when life felt simpler. I ordered a black coffee and sat by the window, staring blankly at the bustling street outside. Couples strolled past, hand in hand, their laughter audible even through the glass. It felt cruel, watching other people live the life I thought was mine. My phone buzzed, pulling me back to the present. A text from Claire. Claire, please come home. We need to talk. I stared at the message, my thumb hovering over the screen. I didn't know what I'd say if I responded, so I didn't. Instead, I dialed a number I hadn't used in months, my best friend Jake. We hadn't spoken much lately, mostly because I had been too busy. Or at least, that's what I told myself. Hey man, Jake answered after the second ring. Long time no hear. What's up? I hesitated, unsure how to begin. Can you meet me somewhere? I could really use a friend right now. Jake didn't ask questions. You got it. Same spot as always. I agreed and hung up, heading to a nearby park where we used to play pickup basketball on weekends. Jake was already there, leaning against his truck with a coffee in hand. All right, Jake said as I approached. What's going on? You look like you've been through the ringer. I sighed and sank onto the bench, my hands clasped tightly between my knees. Claire's been seeing someone else, I said finally, my voice barely above a whisper. Jake's relaxed posture stiffened. What? Are you serious? I nodded, the words spilling out now. It's been going on for months. I found out a few days ago, hired someone to follow her, confirmed everything. I paused, my throat tightening. She says she wants to fix things, but I don't know if I can. Jake let out a low whistle. Dumb, man. That's heavy. He sat down next to me, clapping a hand on my shoulder. You thinking divorce? I shrugged. I don't know. I always thought we'd be forever, you know? We've had problems, sure, but this feels like a line you can't uncross. Jake was quiet for a moment, then said, Look, I don't want to tell you what to do, but trust is everything, man. If she broke that, you've got to ask yourself if you can ever really get it back. I nodded, my thoughts swirling. I stayed there for a while, talking through everything with Jake. By the time we parted, I felt marginally clearer, though the weight of the situation still pressed heavily on my shoulders. When I finally returned home, it was late afternoon. Claire was in the living room, pacing nervously. She turned when I walked in, her face etched with worry. Matt, she began, her voice trembling. I was scared you wouldn't come back. I'm here, I said simply, my voice devoid of warmth. Claire took a tentative step closer. I ended it with Dave, she blurted out. I called him as soon as you left this morning. It's over. I told him I want to focus on us, on fixing this. I searched her face for any sign of deception. What did he say? She hesitated. He wasn't happy, but he understood. I crossed my arms, leaning against the doorway. So that's it? You think calling it off with him makes everything okay? Claire said quickly, tears pooling in her eyes. I know I've destroyed your trust. I know this won't be easy, but I want to try. Please, Matt, don't give up on us. I studied her, my emotions a tangled mess. I wanted to believe her, wanted to believe we could rebuild what had been broken. But every time I thought about those photos, those texts, the nights she'd spent with someone else, the pain resurfaced like a fresh wound. I don't know if I can do this, I said finally, my voice heavy with despair. Claire took another step toward me. Let me show you that I can be better. Let me prove that I'm still the woman you fell in love with. I sighed deeply. You've got a lot to prove, Claire. And honestly, I don't even know if that's enough. But I'll think about it. For now, that was the best I could give her. The days that followed felt like an uneasy truce. Claire tiptoed around me, clearly trying to win back my trust without overwhelming me. She stopped going out in the evenings, deleted her social media accounts, and even asked if I wanted access to her phone and emails. I declined, but the gesture felt hollow, like she was checking boxes rather than rebuilding what was broken. I, on the other hand, felt like I was drowning in uncertainty. I replayed every argument, every promise she'd made, and every instance of her affection. Was it real? Was any of it ever real? On Friday evening, the same night she once reserved for her secret outings, Claire surprised me by setting the dining table with candles and cooking my favorite meal. Homemade lasagna with garlic bread and a bottle of Chianti. Figured we could start a new tradition, she said, her voice light but careful, as though gauging my reaction. I hesitated but agreed. When we sat down, the soft glow of the candles stirred memories of better times. I could almost feel the ghost of our younger selves at the table, laughing and holding hands like the world couldn't touch us. But as the waiter brought our drinks, my thoughts took a darker turn. How many nights had she spent in a place like this with him? How many times had she laughed at his jokes, given him that smile she used to save for me alone? Claire must have sensed my tension. Matt, she asked gently, are you okay? I blinked, realizing I'd been gripping the edge of the table. I'm fine, I lied. She reached across the table, her fingers brushing mine. You can talk to me, about anything. The sincerity in her voice disarmed me. For a moment, I considered telling her the truth, that every time I looked at her, I saw the version of her that had lied to me, that I wasn't sure I could ever see past it. But instead, I said, I know. The rest of the evening passed with careful conversation and forced smiles. On the surface, we looked like a couple rediscovering each other, but underneath, the fissures were widening. The discovery. The following week, I decided to test the fragile piece. I wasn't proud of it, but I needed to know if Claire's promises were real or just a performance. Using the tracking software I'd installed on her phone weeks earlier, I checked her location while she was at work. Her schedule lined up perfectly. No deviations, no unexplained absences. But it wasn't enough to soothe my paranoia. One afternoon, I decided to take a more direct approach. I drove to Claire's office unannounced, arriving during what she described as a quiet afternoon. I parked across the street and waited, my heart pounding. After 20 minutes, Claire emerged from the building, her expression distracted as she typed something on her phone. She wasn't alone. My stomach tightened as I recognized the man walking beside her. Not Dave, but someone else I didn't recognize. The man was laughing, gesturing animatedly as Claire nodded, a faint smile on her lips. I leaned forward, my breath fogging the windshield. Was this innocent, or was history repeating itself? The two of them stopped by a food truck, chatting as they waited in line. I pulled out my phone and took a photo, unsure if I'd ever confront her with it. I didn't even know why I stayed to watch, but some part of me needed to see this through. After getting their food, they returned to the office. Claire never once looked up or glanced around, completely unaware of my presence. I sat in my car for another 10 minutes, my thoughts racing. On the surface, There was nothing incriminating about what I'd seen. But the mere sight of her laughing with another man was enough to send me spiraling. The confrontation. That night, as Claire brushed her teeth, I paced the bedroom, debating whether to bring it up. The photo I'd taken burned a hole in my pocket, daring me to use it. When she emerged from the bathroom, I stopped pacing. "Who's the guy from work?" I asked, my tone casual but pointed. Claire blinked, caught off guard. "What guy?" "The one you went to the food truck with today." Her eyes widened, then softened with relief. "Oh, you mean Eric? He's new on the team. We grabbed lunch during a slow day. That's all." I studied her face, searching for any sign of deceit. She met my gaze evenly, her expression open. "Why didn't you mention him before?" She sighed, sitting on the edge of the bed. "Because it didn't seem important. Matt, I know you're still on edge, and I understand why. But I swear to you, there's nothing going on. I don't want anyone else, and I'm not hiding anything." I wanted to believe her, desperately. But the part of me that had been betrayed refused to let go. "I just need you to be honest with me, Claire," I said finally. "I am," she said softly. "I'm not going to give you a reason to doubt me again. I promise." Her words hung in the air, but they didn't offer the comfort I hoped for. I nodded, turning away to get ready for bed. But as I lay there that night, staring at the ceiling, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was missing something, some crucial detail that would bring everything crashing down again. I woke the next morning to the sound of Claire moving around the kitchen. She was humming softly, a tune I recognized from one of her favorite old playlists. The sound, once comforting, fell out of place. It grated against the turmoil inside me, like her attempts at normalcy were too forced. I tried to push the unease aside as I sipped my coffee and scrolled through emails. My gaze kept drifting to her, though, her deliberate cheerfulness, the way she seemed to be trying too hard. Is this real? Or is she putting on a show? I couldn't tell anymore. That evening, the fragile peace shattered when my phone buzzed with another unexpected message. The sender was Dave. Dave? Couldn't stay away, could she? Told you this would happen. My stomach churned as I stared at the screen. How had Dave gotten my number? And what could he possibly have to say? Before I could think better of it, I replied, "Me? What do you want?" The response came almost immediately. "Dave, look, I know you're trying to work things out with Claire. I just need you to know that she and it wasn't meaningless. It was real." My blood ran cold. I gritted my teeth as I typed back, "Me. Stay out of my marriage. You've done enough damage." Dave's reply came quickly. "Dave, I thought you should hear it from me. She might be saying all the right things now, but I know her. She'll come back to me eventually." My hands shook as I stared at the message, rage bubbling up inside me. I wanted to throw the phone across the room, to march into Claire's office and demand answers. But instead, I forwarded the messages to myself, saving them as evidence. That night, when Claire came home, I was waiting for her in the living room. "We need to talk," I said, my voice sharp and cold. She froze, her smile faltering. "What's wrong?" I held up my phone, the screen displaying Dave's texts. "Care to explain why he thinks you'll come back to him eventually?" Her face went pale as she read the messages. "Matt, I have no idea why he's doing this," she said quickly. "I ended it with him, I swear. I haven't talked to him since that day." I rose to my feet, anger flaring. "You expect me to believe that? After everything?" Tears welled in her eyes. "I can show you my phone, my emails, whatever you need. I don't want anything to do with him, Matt. He's trying to sabotage us because he can't accept that it's over." I stared at her, my thoughts a chaotic storm. "Then explain this," I demanded, holding up my phone. "Why does he sound so confident? Why does he think you're still interested?" Claire's voice wavered. "I don't know," she whispered. "I've cut him off completely. He's doing this to mess with you." I didn't respond. Instead, I turned away, walking into the kitchen to pour myself a drink. Behind me, Claire's quiet sobs filled the air. An unexpected call. Just as I began to settle into the cold silence, my phone buzzed again. This time, the caller ID read unknown. I hesitated but answered. "Hello?" A voice crackled on the other end. It wasn't Dave. It was a woman. "Is this Matt?" she asked, her tone wary. "Yes," I replied. "Who's this?" The woman hesitated before saying, "My name is Erica. I'm, I'm Dave's wife." My breath hitched. "What do you want?" "I thought you should know what's really going on," Erica said, her voice trembling. "Dave, he's been lying to both of us. About everything." I exchanged a sharp glance with Claire, who had stopped crying and was now staring at me in alarm. "I'm listening," I said tightly. Erica's words tumbled out in a rush. "He told me he was seeing your wife, but I found out it wasn't true. He's been obsessed with her for months, even before all this started. He made it up to get under your skin." My grip on the phone tightened. "Why would he do that?" "Because he's a manipulative bastard," Erica said bitterly. "He thrives on control. I caught him sending messages from a burner phone, pretending to be her. He wanted to break up your marriage, so he could feel like he won." The revelation hit me like a truck. "You're saying this was all fake?" "Not all of it," Erica admitted. "They did meet a few times, but I think it was more innocent than he let on. After she cut him off, he lost it. He's been trying to stir up drama ever since." I lowered the phone, the weight of her words crashing down on me. Claire's wide eyes met mine, her lips moving silently as if to ask, "What's happening?" "Thank you," I said finally, my voice hollow. "I need some time to process this." Erica sighed. "I understand. For what it's worth, I'm leaving him. You deserve better than what he's put you through." The line went dead, and I lowered the phone slowly. "Who was that?" Claire asked nervously. I looked at her, my expression unreadable. "Dave's wife. She just blew this whole thing wide open." Claire stared at me, her face a mixture of fear and hope. "What did she say?" she asked softly. I sank onto the couch, running a hand through my hair. "She said Dave made it all up," I said slowly. "The texts, the emails. He sent most of them himself, pretending to be you. He wanted to sabotage our marriage." Her mouth fell open. "What? Why would he do that?" "Because he's a control freak," I replied bitterly. "And apparently, he couldn't handle being rejected." Claire sat down beside me, her hands trembling. "Matt, I swear I didn't know he was doing any of this. I cut him off completely. I thought it was over." I looked at her, my thoughts swirling. The sheer audacity of Dave's scheme was too convoluted for Claire to have been complicit. But the scars of her original betrayal still ached, and no revelation could erase those. "I don't even know what to think anymore," I admitted, my voice heavy. "Every time I feel like I'm getting closer to the truth, something else comes out and knocks me sideways." "I'll do whatever it takes to make this right," Claire said, her eyes pleading. "We can go to counseling. I'll find a new job. Anything. Just please don't give up on us." I stared at her, the woman I'd shared a life with for so many years, and felt the weight of my exhaustion. "I don't know if I can do this, Claire. I don't know if I'll ever stop questioning." The next move, over the next few days, I wrestled with my emotions. I wanted to move forward, to rebuild the trust that Dave's manipulation had all but obliterated. But the fear of being blindsided again loomed large. I also couldn't shake the nagging feeling that Dave might still try something. Erica's call had revealed his obsession, but it didn't guarantee that he would back off entirely. To protect myself, I decided to take action. I reached out to an attorney, not to file for divorce, but to discuss my options. "You need to document everything," the lawyer advised. "Texts, emails, even that call from Dave's wife. If this escalates, you'll want proof to show it wasn't just your imagination." I also installed additional security measures at home: cameras, door sensors, and alerts for anything suspicious. It was overkill, but I couldn't shake the paranoia. Claire supported the changes without complaint. She even offered to help set up the cameras, saying it made her feel safer too. The final provocation. One evening, as I was finishing up some work in my office, my phone buzzed with an email notification. The sender was unfamiliar, but the subject line froze me in my tracks. "You should know the truth about Claire." My heart pounded as I opened it. Inside were several photos of Claire and Dave at the cafe, walking together, laughing. The timestamps were older, from the weeks before Claire had claimed to end the affair. A short message accompanied the photos. "You think you're safe? You're not. She'll always come back to me." I clenched my jaw, my teeth grinding as I forwarded the email to Erica, hoping she might confirm it was Dave again. A reply came almost immediately. "Erica, This is definitely him. He's trying to stir the pot. I'll handle it. I appreciated her support, but it wasn't enough to quell the simmering rage. I stormed into the living room, where Claire was folding laundry, oblivious to the storm brewing in my mind. "We need to talk," I said, my voice tight. She looked up, her face instantly worried. "What's wrong?" I handed her my phone, watching as her face went pale. "I thought you said it was over, that you'd cut him off completely." "I did," she cried, setting the phone down as if it burned her. "Those pictures are from before I ended it. He's doing this to mess with you." "And what about this?" I asked, scrolling to the email's taunting message. Claire's voice wavered. "I don't know how to prove it to you, Matt. I didn't send those photos to him. I haven't spoken to him at all." I stared at her, the weight of everything pressing down on me. "You put us here," I said finally. "You let this man into our lives, and now he's tearing us apart." Claire burst into tears, burying her face in her hands. "I know I made mistakes, but I'm begging you, Matt, don't let him win. Don't let him destroy what we still have." I sighed, my anger giving way to a hollow, aching fatigue. "I don't know if there's anything left to destroy," I said quietly. Her sobs echoed through the room, and for the first time, I felt the full weight of my own broken heart. The night after Dave's latest provocation, I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling while Claire slept beside me. Her breathing was slow and even, but I was far from calm. Dave's taunts echoed in my head, each word laced with the unmistakable arrogance of someone who thought he still had a chance. "She'll always come back to me." I clenched my fists, my thoughts spiraling. What if Dave was right? What if Claire's efforts to repair our marriage were just temporary? The paranoia felt like a poison, seeping into every corner of my mind. Unable to sleep, I slipped out of bed and grabbed my phone. I opened the forwarded messages from Dave and stared at them for a long moment. Then, an idea began to form, a plan to get to the truth once and for all. The next day, I reached out to Dave using a new number, one he wouldn't recognize. "Me, posing as Claire. Dave, it's me. I need to see you." I waited, the seconds stretching into an eternity before Dave replied. "Dave, I knew you'd come around." "When?" My stomach churned, but I typed carefully, mimicking Claire's tone. "Me, posing as Claire tonight. Usual spot?" "Dave." "Perfect. Can't wait to see you." I stared at the words, a mix of anger and grim satisfaction coursing through me. Dave had taken the bait. Now all I needed to do was show up and end this once and for all. That evening, I prepared carefully. I dressed casually, not wanting to draw attention, and parked a block away from the cafe Dave had named in his reply. I arrived early, choosing a shadowy spot near the window where I could watch without being seen. At 7:05 p.m., Dave walked in. He looked confident, his hair neatly combed, a faint smile playing on his lips as he scanned the room. He chose a table near the back, settling in with the ease of someone who thought he was meeting a lover. My pulse quickened as I observed the man who had nearly destroyed my marriage. Dave seemed so ordinary, nothing like the larger-than-life figure I had built up in my head. Yet the sight of him sitting there, waiting for Claire, ignited a rage I could barely contain. Dave checked his watch, then his phone, occasionally glancing toward the door. After 20 minutes, his confident demeanor began to falter. He frowned, pulling out his phone to type a message. My phone buzzed a moment later. "Dave, are you coming?" "I'm here." I took a deep breath and responded. "Me, posing as Claire. I'm here too." "Look outside." Dave's brow furrowed in confusion as he turned toward the window. I stepped into the light, letting the full weight of my presence sink in. Dave's face shifted from confusion to alarm. He stood abruptly, knocking over his chair as he hurried toward the door. I met him halfway. "Going somewhere?" I asked coldly, my voice low enough that only he could hear. Dave stopped, his eyes darting around as though searching for an escape. "Matt, this isn't what it looks like," he stammered. "Oh, it's exactly what it looks like," I snapped. "And now you're going to tell me the truth. All of it." Dave glanced toward the other patrons, his panic growing. "Look, I don't want any trouble." "Then you shouldn't have gone after another man's wife," I growled. I stepped closer, my voice dropping to a menacing whisper. Sit down, or I'll make a scene you'll never forget. Dave hesitated, then slowly lowered himself back into his chair. I followed, taking the seat across from him. The cafe's warm lighting suddenly felt harsh, exposing every bead of sweat on Dave's brow. Start talking, I demanded. What was your plan? You think she's just going to leave me and run off with you? Dave hesitated, his hands trembling. I didn't think she'd stay with you. She told me things weren't good between you two. I thought. You thought wrong. I interrupted, my voice icy. She's staying with me, and you're going to stay the hell out of our lives. Dave opened his mouth to respond, but I cut him off. And one more thing. If I so much as see your name pop up again, if I even hear about you sniffing around her, I'll make sure everyone knows exactly who you are and what you've done. Your job, your reputation, your life, I'll ruin all of it. Do you understand me? Dave nodded quickly, his face pale. I understand. I stood leaning in one last time. Good, because if I have to come back here, I won't be so polite. Without another word, I walked out, leaving Dave slumped in his chair, looking thoroughly defeated. When I returned home, Claire was waiting in the living room, her face pale and anxious. Where were you? She asked, her voice tinged with concern. Taking care of us, I said simply, my voice heavy with exhaustion. I didn't elaborate, and Claire didn't press me. For the first time in weeks, I felt a small flicker of hope. The battle wasn't over, but I had taken the first step in reclaiming control of my life. The days following my confrontation with Dave were surprisingly calm. He didn't try to contact Claire again, or at least, if he did, she made no mention of it. The tension in the house had lessened, but it hadn't disappeared. It felt like walking on a frozen lake, stable on the surface but liable to crack at any moment. Claire seemed genuinely committed to proving her loyalty. She doubled down on her efforts to rebuild our connection, planning date nights, leaving sticky notes with affectionate messages on the bathroom mirror, and trying to engage me in heartfelt conversations. But I struggled to meet her halfway. Every time I caught a glimpse of her phone or saw her smiling at something on her screen, my mind wandered to darker places. I couldn't stop myself from imagining her slipping back into old habits, sneaking off to meet someone else. One night, as we sat on the couch watching a movie, Claire paused it suddenly. Matt, she said softly, turning to face me. I need to ask you something. I shifted uncomfortably, bracing myself. What is it? Do you think you'll ever forgive me? The question hit me like a punch to the chest. Forgiveness. The one thing she wanted, and the one thing I didn't know if I could give. I don't know, I admitted, my voice heavy. I want to. I'm trying. But every time I look at you, I see him. I see what you did. Claire's eyes welled with tears, but she didn't look away. I don't blame you. I need you to know how sorry I am. For all of it. I nodded, swallowing the lump in my throat. I believe you're sorry. But it's not just about being sorry, Claire. It's about trust. And that's going to take a long time to rebuild. I'll wait as long as it takes, she said, her voice trembling. I'll do whatever it takes. I didn't respond, turning my attention back to the paused movie. After a long moment, Claire unpaused it, and we sat in silence, the distance between us as palpable as ever. The letter. The following week, I found an envelope on the kitchen counter, my name written on it in Claire's handwriting. I hesitated before opening it, unsure if I wanted to read what she had to say. Finally, I slid out the folded piece of paper and began to read. Matt, I know I've said I'm sorry more times than I can count, but I need you to really hear me. I am so deeply sorry for everything I've done, for betraying your trust, for lying, for dragging us into this nightmare. If I could take it all back, I would. I didn't start this affair because I didn't love you. I started it because I lost sight of what I already had. You've always been there for me, always put us first, and I took that for granted. I thought I needed something else, but the truth is I was just running from my own insecurities. I know words aren't enough, and I don't expect you to forgive me overnight. But I want you to know that I'm committed to rebuilding what we lost, even if it takes the rest of my life. If there's any part of you that still wants us to work, I'll do whatever it takes to earn your trust again. If not, I'll respect your decision. You deserve happiness, even if it's not with me. Love always, Claire. I set the letter down, my hands trembling. It was the most honest thing she'd said in months, but honesty alone didn't erase the damage. I folded the letter carefully and placed it back in the envelope, unsure what to do with the mix of emotions swirling inside me. A decision. That night, Claire joined me on the couch, her movements tentative. "Did you read it?" she asked softly. "I did," I said, my voice measured. "And?" I sighed, leaning back against the cushions. "I believe you're sorry, Claire. I believe you want to fix this. But I don't know if I can give you what you're asking for. Every time I look at you, I see him. I see the lies, the betrayal. It's like a wound that doesn't stop bleeding." Tears filled Claire's eyes, but she nodded. "I understand. I need space," I said finally. "Time to think, to figure out if I can move forward with you, or if it's better for both of us to let go." Claire wiped at her cheeks. "Take all the time you need. I hope you'll give us a chance." I didn't respond. I stood, grabbing my coat. "I'm going for a walk." As I stepped outside, the cold night air filled my lungs, grounding me. I didn't know where I was going or what the future held, but for the first time in weeks, I felt a small glimmer of clarity. Some decisions take time, and some answers are only found in the spaces between heartbreak and healing. 2 weeks passed, marked by silence and distance. I spent the nights at a small motel just outside town, using the time alone to reflect. Each day, I wrestled with the same question. Do I stay or do I go? Claire didn't call or text, honoring my need for space. But I knew she was waiting, hoping for a sign that I hadn't already made up my mind. One evening, I found myself walking along the lake where we used to picnic in our early years of marriage. The wind whipped across the water, cold and biting, but I didn't notice. My thoughts were far away, replaying every moment of our relationship, the good and the bad. I thought about our first date, the way she laughed at my terrible jokes. I thought about the day we bought our first home, full of excitement and plans for the future. And I thought about the night I saw the photo of her with Dave, the moment that had changed everything. The memories were a jumble, a mix of love, pain, and uncertainty. A choice. When I returned to the motel that night, I sat at the small desk by the window and wrote 2 letters. The first was for Claire. It was long, detailing everything I'd felt since the moment I found out about the affair. I wrote about the anger, the betrayal, and the doubt that had consumed me. But I also wrote about the love that still lingered beneath the wreckage, a stubborn ember refusing to die. The second letter was for myself. It was shorter, a kind of promise. No matter what happens next, you deserve peace. Don't forget that. I stared at both letters for a long time, then placed the one for Claire in my bag and left the motel. The return. When I walked through the door of our home, Claire was in the kitchen, her back to me. She turned at the sound of the door and froze, her eyes widening. "You're back," she said softly. "For now," I replied, setting my bag down. We stood in silence for a moment, the weight of everything unsaid hanging between us. Finally, I spoke. "We need to talk," I said. Claire nodded, her hands twisting nervously. "Okay." We sat at the dining table, and I placed the letter in front of her. "This explains everything I've been feeling, everything I haven't been able to say out loud. I want you to read it." Claire's hands trembled as she picked up the letter. She read in silence, tears streaming down her face as she reached the final lines. When she looked up, her voice was barely audible. Do you think we can fix this?" I leaned forward, my gaze steady. "That depends on both of us. I can't promise that things will ever go back to the way they were. But if we're going to try, we need to rebuild from the ground up. That means counseling, full honesty, and time. I'll do whatever it takes," Claire said, her voice thick with emotion. I nodded slowly. "This is your last chance, Claire. I need you to understand that. If you break my trust again, we're done." "I won't," she whispered. "I promise." The path ahead. The weeks that followed were difficult. We began counseling, where I aired every grievance, and Claire answered every question, no matter how painful. The process was exhausting, but slowly, we began to find common ground. I still had doubts, and there were moments when the weight of everything threatened to overwhelm me. But I also saw Claire's determination, her willingness to fight for our marriage, and it gave me hope. One evening, as we sat together on the couch, Claire reached for my hand. "Thank you," she said quietly. "For what?" "For giving us a chance," she said. I didn't respond right away. Instead, I squeezed her hand gently, the smallest of gestures, but one that carried more weight than words ever could. Our journey was far from over, but for the first time in a long time, I felt something I hadn't thought possible, the faintest glimmer of peace. And for now, that was enough.